The colony world of Eos 9 was quiet that morning. The twin suns had just risen above the hills, painting the dusty sky in soft orange light. A group of human engineers was working outside the outpost, fixing cables and setting up new solar panels. The outpost had been abandoned for years, but now humans had returned to rebuild it. They wanted to make it a home again, a place where families could live safely far from Earth. Ethan Cole, a tall man in his early 30s, was checking a power relay near the outer fence. His friend and co-worker, Maria Lopez, was helping him align the connectors. They joked as they worked, their voices echoing softly in the dry air. Life on Eos 9 could be lonely, and laughter helped keep the long days from feeling endless. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Ethan looked up. A low growl rolled through the air like distant thunder. Maria stopped moving and listened. The sound came again, closer this time. It was not a machine. It was alive. From the edge of the forest, dark shapes appeared. At first, Ethan thought they were small animals. But as they moved closer, he saw they were not small at all. Scales glinted in the sunlight, and thin wings flicked open and shut. Their eyes shone like amber stones. They were creatures no one had ever seen before. Something between a dragon and a lizard, but faster, meaner, and hungrier. Maria gasped. "Ethan, what are those?" He didn't answer. The creatures crept closer, sniffing the air. There were 6 of them, maybe more, each the size of a large dog. They made a sharp clicking noise with their teeth. One of them suddenly leaped onto a storage crate, tearing it open. Inside were boxes of dried food. The creature grabbed a packet and tried to bite it open, growling in frustration. The noise drew more of them. They rushed from the forest, their claws scraping the metal surface of the landing pad. The workers shouted and ran for cover. Alarms started blaring around the outpost. Someone yelled over the comms, "Wildlife breach! Everyone get inside!" Ethan grabbed Maria's arm and pulled her toward the gate. Behind them, a creature smashed into the power relay they had just fixed. Sparks exploded into the air. The lights flickered, and part of the fence went dark. "Come on!" Maria shouted. They ran inside the main building as the outer doors sealed shut. Through the glass window, Ethan saw the creatures swarming the yard, tearing open supply crates and chasing after anything that moved. One of the guards fired a warning shot from the tower. The sound scared the creatures, but only for a moment. They hissed and scattered, then circled back, snarling louder than before. Inside the command room, the colony leader, Captain Laura Pierce, looked at the live feed on the monitor. Her brow was tight with worry. "They came out of nowhere," she said. "We've had motion sensors on that ridge for weeks. Nothing ever showed up. They were probably hiding underground," Ethan said, still breathing hard. "They didn't look like hunters. More like they were desperate." "Desperate," Maria repeated. "They almost tore through our supplies." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but did you see them? They went for food, not people. They're starving." Captain Pierce didn't look convinced. "Whatever they are, they're dangerous. Until we know more, no one leaves the outpost. I want all teams to stay on lockdown. Set up more perimeter drones. If they come back, we'll be ready." Ethan wanted to argue, but he could tell it wasn't the right time. He sat down and watched the monitor quietly. The creatures, hatchlings, he guessed, were now gathering near the old mining pit beyond the forest. They seemed to be guarding something there, something unseen. Hours passed. The sky grew darker, and the alarms finally stopped. The hatchlings had gone back into the woods. The outpost was safe again for now. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about them. Their eyes hadn't looked evil. They looked scared, like they were defending themselves from something. He wondered what could frighten a creature like that. That night, while the others slept, Ethan stood by the window and watched the forest. The moonlight touched the trees, turning them silver. Somewhere in that darkness, the hatchlings were hiding. He could almost hear their cries echoing softly across the valley. He whispered to himself, "What are you, little monsters?" And deep in the woods, something answered. A low, distant roar that sounded both lonely and ancient. Eos 9 had many secrets, and Ethan Cole had just stumbled upon one of its oldest. The next morning on EOS 9 was quiet, almost too quiet. The colony was still under lockdown after the attack. No one wanted to step outside, not after what had happened. The air smelled faintly of burned metal from the damaged power relay. Ethan Cole sat in the maintenance bay, staring at a half-repaired drone. He wasn't thinking about work. His mind was still full of those creatures, the dragon hatchlings that had appeared from the forest. Maria Lopez came in holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him and sat down beside him. "You're still thinking about them, aren't you?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I can't get them out of my head. They weren't attacking for fun. They were scared. Hungry, maybe. Something's not right about it." Maria took a sip of her drink and sighed. "Even if that's true, you saw what they did. They destroyed half our food supply. If they come back, we won't last a week without another shipment from orbit." Before Ethan could answer, the colony speakers came alive with a sharp beep. Captain Laura Pierce's voice filled the room. "All personnel, report to the command deck. We've got movement outside the perimeter. Be ready." Ethan and Maria exchanged looks. They grabbed their helmets and hurried to the command room. On the main monitor, the drone cameras showed shapes moving near the fence line again. The hatchlings had returned. They weren't attacking this time, just circling slowly, watching. "They're testing us," one of the guards said. Captain Pierce crossed her arms. "Or they're planning something worse. Keep the defense systems online, but do not engage unless they cross the barrier." Ethan watched closely. One of the hatchlings, smaller than the others, limped as it moved. Its wing looked torn. Another, slightly larger, nudged it forward gently. He frowned. "They're helping each other." Captain Pierce looked at him. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't think they're wild beasts," Ethan said. "They act like a pack, organized, maybe even intelligent. They might understand more than we think." Maria whispered, "Ethan, careful. The captain doesn't like theories without proof." But Captain Pierce didn't scold him. She stared at the screen, her jaw tight. "If they're intelligent, that makes them more dangerous, not less. Keep all gates sealed. No one goes outside." The hatchlings stayed near the perimeter for several hours, sniffing the air and scratching at the ground. Then, as the suns began to set, they retreated back into the forest again. The colonists finally relaxed, but Ethan couldn't. He watched the last drone feed until the screen went dark. Later that night, he found Maria in the dining hall. She was sitting alone, eating from a ration pack. "You know, I read the colony's old reports," she said as he sat down. "There used to be mining stations near those woods. Maybe those creatures came from there. Maybe something happened underground." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe they were here long before us. We built over their home." Maria looked uneasy. "If that's true, they won't stop coming. They'll fight to protect their nest." Ethan leaned back, thinking. Or maybe they don't want to fight at all. Maybe they just want something we took. She frowned. "Like what? Food? Or peace?" Ethan said quietly. "They didn't attack the people who stood still. They only went after the ones who shouted or ran." Maria shook her head. "You're reading too much into this." "Maybe," he said, but his tone was thoughtful. "But I want to know for sure." The next day, Ethan made a plan. While everyone else stayed inside, he decided to repair one of the observation drones and fly it closer to the forest ridge. He wanted to see where the hatchlings were going. Maybe he could find their nest. He didn't tell Captain Pierce. He only told Maria. She argued with him for 10 minutes before finally giving up. "If you get eaten, I'm not explaining it to the captain," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "I'll bring back something useful. I promise." He launched the drone just after sunrise. The small machine buzzed quietly as it flew over the trees. The live feed showed thick canopies, broken ground, and something shining faintly between the rocks. Then the camera caught movement. 3 hatchlings gathered around what looked like a pile of bones. They were eating something, but not like beasts. They shared the food carefully, one piece at a time. Then, the smallest one looked up and stared straight at the drone camera. Its amber eyes glowed in the light. For a moment, Ethan felt like it was staring at him personally, as if it knew he was watching. The drone feed cut out suddenly. Static filled the screen. Maria leaned over his shoulder. "What happened?" "I don't know," Ethan said quietly. "But I think they know we're watching." He turned off the monitor and looked out toward the dark forest beyond the fence. He didn't feel fear this time, only curiosity, and something else he couldn't explain. It was the beginning of an understanding, though he didn't yet know it. Ethan Cole couldn't sleep that night. The image of the small dragon hatchling staring into the drone camera wouldn't leave his mind. There was something about the way it looked, aware, curious, maybe even afraid. It wasn't just an animal's gaze. It was something more. The next morning, he sat in the corner of the mess hall, drinking cold coffee while the others talked about repairs and ration shortages. Everyone was tense. The attacks had stopped, but no one knew for how long. Captain Pierce had ordered the colony's defenses doubled. She wanted the outer fences rebuilt and armed drones ready to fly at all times. No one argued with her. No one except Ethan. He had a different idea, though he hadn't shared it yet. When Maria joined him, she could tell from his face that he was thinking of something dangerous. "Don't say it," she warned. "Whatever you're planning, just don't." Ethan smiled faintly. "I just want to understand them, Maria. The drones aren't enough. They can sense the machines. If we keep spying, they'll see us as a threat." "And what's your plan?" "Walk up to them and say hello." "Something like that," he said quietly. Maria groaned and rubbed her temples. "Ethan, you'll get yourself killed. You saw what they did to the fence." "I saw what hunger did to them," he replied. "They didn't attack until they found food. If we can show them we're not enemies, maybe we can stop this before someone gets hurt." Maria looked at him for a long moment. "You sound crazy." "Maybe," he said, standing up, "but I'm going to find out." He spent the rest of the morning studying the drone footage. He paused every frame that showed the hatchlings near the old mining site. The ground there was full of broken metal and stone, the leftovers of abandoned human work. But beneath the rubble he saw movement, smaller shadows that looked like eggs. That explained a lot. The hatchlings were protecting their nest. When he showed Maria the images, she gasped. "They have eggs? That means they're breeding near the colony." "Exactly," Ethan said. "And we're building right on their territory. They're defending their home." Maria stared at the screen. "Then why not tell Captain Pierce?" Ethan shook his head. "Because she'll order an extermination mission. She thinks in terms of defense, not communication. If we scare them or kill them, we'll never get peace." Maria looked down. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to go there," he said simply. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. She knew there was no point. Once Ethan decided something, nothing could change his mind. That evening, when the suns began to dip behind the hills, Ethan packed a small kit. A communicator, a field scanner, and one of his meal packs. He slipped out through the maintenance airlock, moving quietly so the guards wouldn't see him. The wind was cool and carried the faint scent of dust and metal. He followed the old trail toward the forest ridge, keeping his steps slow and quiet. As he reached the edge of the trees, the world seemed to grow still. The forest was thick and strange, full of plants that glowed faintly in the fading light. The ground was soft under his boots. He could hear distant chirps and hums of alien life, but no movement from the hatchlings yet. He stopped near a fallen log and took out his scanner. The readings showed faint heat signatures ahead, 6 or 7 of them, clustered together near the base of a rocky hill. That was where they were nesting. Ethan's heart pounded, but he kept going. When he reached a clearing, he finally saw them. The hatchlings were smaller than he remembered, their scales shining silver and bronze in the dim light. They were curled around a shallow pit full of eggs, some already cracked open. The smallest one, the one he had seen in the drone footage, looked up suddenly and hissed. Ethan froze. He didn't raise his hands or make a sound. He just stood there, breathing slowly. The creature tilted its head, studying him. He knelt down slowly, placing his pack on the ground. Then he opened it and pulled out his ration meal. The warm smell of cooked food filled the air. The hatchlings sniffed, restless but curious. Ethan didn't move. He opened the pack completely and placed it on the ground in front of him. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The forest was silent except for the faint hum of the wind. Then one of the hatchlings crept forward, wings twitching. It stopped a few feet away and sniffed the air again. Ethan stayed perfectly still. Finally, the hatchling took a small step closer. His claws clicked against the stones. It leaned down and sniffed the food, then looked at Ethan again, as if waiting for permission. He didn't move, didn't speak. After a few more seconds, the creature picked up a piece of food with its teeth and backed away slowly. The others watched, then began to approach as well. One of them chirped softly, almost like a question. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had done it. He had made contact. But before he could react, there was a loud beep from his communicator. Someone from the outpost was calling him. The hatchlings hissed, startled, and scattered back toward the nest. Ethan cursed under his breath and shut off the device, but it was too late. The moment was broken. He stood up slowly, backing away from the clearing. He didn't want to frighten them again. As he disappeared into the trees, he looked back once more. The smallest hatchling was watching him again, its eyes reflecting the last light of sunset. Ethan smiled softly. He had just taken the first step toward peace, even if no one else knew it yet. Ethan Cole barely slept after his first meeting with the hatchlings. His heart still raced whenever he thought about the moment the little creatures had approached him without attacking. It was dangerous and reckless, but it had worked. He had proven that they weren't mindless monsters. They were scared, hungry, and maybe even capable of trust. The next morning, Captain Pierce summoned everyone to the command room. The atmosphere was tense. A new patrol drone had gone missing near the ridge, and the security team suspected the hatchlings were responsible. Pierce wanted to send an armed unit to investigate. Ethan sat quietly at the back of the room. He knew if they went in with weapons, everything he'd done would be ruined. "Captain," he said finally, standing up, "I don't think they're attacking the drones on purpose. They're defending their nest. If we go in with guns, we'll just start another fight." Pierce turned sharply toward him. "You think I don't know what I'm doing, Cole?" "No, ma'am," he said carefully. "I just think there's another way. Let me try to reach them again." The room went silent. Maria looked at him like he'd lost his mind. One of the guards laughed quietly. "You want to walk up to a pack of fire-breathing lizards and talk to them?" Ethan met the captain's eyes. "If it stops another attack, yes." Pierce studied him for a long moment. "You've got 2 hours. If you're not back by then, I'll send a team to drag you home." Ethan nodded. That was all he needed. He packed light, just a ration meal, a portable scanner, and his communicator, this time turned off. Maria caught up to him outside the airlock. "Ethan, this is insane," she said. "What if they turn on you this time?" He smiled faintly. "Then at least I'll know I tried." Maria looked down, frustrated. "You're going to get yourself killed over a bunch of overgrown reptiles." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "They're not just reptiles. You'll see." He left before she could argue again. The walk through the forest was quiet except for the soft hum of insects and the crunch of dust beneath his boots. The trees arched overhead, their silver leaves reflecting the sunlight like glass. EOS 9 was beautiful, but wild, untamed, unpredictable, and full of secrets. When Ethan reached the same clearing as before, he stopped. The air was still. The nest was there, half hidden by roots and stones. He could see movement, wings flicking, claws scraping against rock. The hatchlings were awake. He took a deep breath and stepped forward slowly. The largest one noticed him first. It hissed, its throat glowing faintly with heat. Ethan froze and lowered himself to the ground, showing he wasn't a threat. He sat cross-legged in the dirt, took out his ration pack, and opened it. Steam rose into the cool air. It was just a simple meal, beef stew and bread, but the smell was rich and warm. He set the pack on the ground and began eating slowly, not looking directly at the hatchlings. At first, they kept their distance. He could hear them growling softly, their tails sweeping the ground. But then one of them sniffed the air. The smallest hatchling, the one with the torn wing, crept forward a few steps, tilted its head, curious. Ethan tore a piece of bread and placed it on a flat rock between them. Then he leaned back, keeping his hands in plain sight. Minutes passed. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the small hatchling stepped closer. It sniffed the bread, then looked at Ethan again. He stayed still. Slowly, it took the bread and backed away, chewing carefully. A soft, low sound came from its throat. Not a growl, but something like a chirp. Ethan smiled. "Yeah," he whispered. "It's food. It's okay." Another hatchling moved forward, then another. Soon, 3 of them were near the rock, tasting the food, huffing softly at the strange smell. The biggest one stayed back, watching protectively. Ethan didn't move. He let them eat. He could feel the tension fading. Their movements grew slower, calmer. One of them even sat down, curling its tail around itself. For the first time, he saw them not as monsters, but as living things, creatures with families, instincts, and fear. They weren't trying to destroy the colony. They were just trying to survive. After a while, the food was gone. The smallest hatchling came closer, stopping only a few feet away. It tilted its head again, its eyes wide and bright. Ethan slowly lifted his hand and placed it on the ground, palm open. The hatchling sniffed the air, then stretched its neck forward. Its nose brushed his fingers for a brief second before it pulled back. Ethan's heart pounded, but he didn't move. The connection was fragile, but it was real. Then, from far behind, came the sudden echo of a gunshot. The hatchlings shrieked and leaped back toward the nest. Ethan turned in shock. The sound came from the ridge. One of the patrols had fired. "No, no, no," he muttered. He backed away slowly, not wanting to scare them further. The largest hatchling roared, wings flaring wide, and flames burst from its mouth into the air. The trees shook from the blast. Ethan ran for cover as smoke filled the clearing. When he looked back, the hatchlings were gone, vanishing into the forest. He sat down against a rock, coughing from the smoke. His simple meal still lay scattered on the ground. Despite the chaos, he smiled weakly. For a few minutes before the shot, they had trusted him. That meant something. He knew now there was a chance, a small one, but enough to change everything. Ethan Cole woke up in the infirmary the next morning, his head still ringing from the explosion of sound and fire that had filled the forest. His clothes were torn, and his hands were bandaged. Maria sat beside his bed, looking tired and angry at the same time. "You're lucky to be alive," she said quietly. "When the gunfire started, Captain Pierce thought you were dead." Ethan groaned and tried to sit up. "The hatchlings. They're gone," Maria said. "After the shot, they disappeared back into the woods. The patrol swears they only fired a warning round, but you know how it goes. The captain's furious." Ethan looked down at his bandaged hands. "We were so close, Maria. They were eating. They weren't attacking. They trusted me. For a moment." She frowned. "You think you can just earn their trust again after that?" He met her eyes. "I have to try, because if I don't, the captain's next move will be to destroy them." Maria leaned back, frustrated. "You don't even know if they understand you." "I don't need them to understand words," Ethan said. "They understand actions. Food, peace, calm." Captain Pierce entered the room then, her boots clanging against the floor. Her expression was cold and sharp. "You disobeyed orders, Cole," she said. "You endangered this colony and nearly got yourself killed." Ethan stood, though unsteady, on his feet. "I found their nest, Captain. They're not monsters. They're defending their eggs. If we attack them, they'll fight to the last one." Pierce crossed her arms. "You're suggesting we just feed them instead?" "I'm suggesting we try something that doesn't involve guns," Ethan said. "Give me one more chance. If I can't calm them, then you can do whatever you have to do. But if I'm right, this colony could make allies instead of enemies." Pierce looked at him for a long, tense moment. Finally, she sighed. "You've got one last chance, Cole. You step 1 foot out of line, and I'll bring you back in chains." Understood, ma'am. Maria walked with Ethan to the airlock when he left again. This time she didn't argue. She just handed him a small bag of cooked rations and a portable heat pack. In case they don't like cold food, she said with a faint smile. He smiled back. Thanks, Maria, for believing in me. I don't, she said softly. But I don't want to see you die alone. The walk to the forest felt longer this time. Every sound made Ethan tense. The forest seemed to whisper with hidden life, the air heavy with heat and dust. When he reached the clearing, he stopped near the same rock where he had left the bread last time. The burned trees still smoked faintly. The air smelled of ash. He knelt down slowly, opened his pack, and placed the food on the ground again. He waited. Minutes passed. Then a rustle from the shadows. One of the hatchlings appeared, the smallest one with the torn wing. The scales glimmered faintly. It watched him, cautious but not angry. Ethan smiled gently. Hey there, he said softly. Remember me? He slid a piece of warm stew closer with a metal plate. The hatchling hesitated, then stepped closer. It sniffed, clicked its teeth, and took a bite. Its eyes flicked up at him again, less fearful now. Soon, 2 more hatchlings emerged. They stayed behind the smaller one, letting it test the food first. Ethan stayed perfectly still. He wanted them to know he meant no harm. Then, from behind the nest, a new sound. A deep, slow growl. The largest hatchling, nearly twice the size of the others, stepped into view. Its wings spread wide, showing burn marks from the gunshot the day before. Ethan's pulse quickened. This was the one that had breathed fire. The big hatchling moved toward the plate and sniffed it. For a tense moment, Ethan thought it would attack. But instead, it lowered its head and took a piece of food gently in its jaws. Then it looked up and met Ethan's eyes. Something passed between them, a silent understanding. The creature made a low sound, like a rumble, not threatening but calm. The smaller ones echoed the sound softly, a chorus of chirps and growls. Ethan's throat tightened. He whispered, "It's okay. You're safe." He slowly took a small device from his pocket, a recorder, and set it on the ground. He didn't speak, just let it capture the moment. The soft noises, the shifting movement, the quiet peace. For the first time since humans had landed on Eos 9, there was no fear between the 2 species. When the food was gone, the hatchlings didn't retreat. They stayed near him, watching curiously. The smallest one crept forward again and pressed its snout lightly against his arm. The scales were warm and smooth. Ethan froze, barely daring to breathe. The moment felt fragile, sacred. After a while, the hatchlings began to move back toward their nest. The largest one turned once and gave a low, almost musical rumble before disappearing into the shadows. Ethan sat there alone for a while, his heart pounding. He had done it. The first real contact had been made. When he returned to the colony, Maria was waiting by the gate. "Well?" she asked. He smiled tiredly. "They ate with me. No fire this time." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" He nodded. "We're not at war anymore." Captain Pierce met him in the command room, arms crossed, skeptical as always. Ethan played the recording from his device. The sounds of the hatchlings filled the room. Soft clicks, low rumbles, peaceful and curious. For once, Pierce didn't speak right away. She just listened. When it ended, she looked at him. "All right, Cole. You might be onto something. Keep it up, but stay careful. You've started something we can't afford to lose." Ethan nodded. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since arriving on Eos 9, he felt hope. It had all started with a meal, a little courage, and a lot of trust. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of alarms echoing through the colony. He jumped out of bed, heart racing. Red lights flashed across the ceiling as the intercom crackled to life. "All personnel report to command. We have unidentified movement near the southern ridge." Ethan ran to the command center, still pulling on his jacket. Captain Pierce stood over the main console, staring at the holographic map. Blue dots represented the colony patrols. Several red ones blinked near the outer forest. "What's happening?" Ethan asked, out of breath. Pierce glanced at him. Your friends are back. The scanners picked up 6 large life signs moving toward the perimeter. They're not hiding this time. Ethan stepped closer to the screen. They're not attacking. Look at the pattern, they're moving slow in formation. That's not an ambush. Maria looked up from another console. They're coming straight toward us. Like they want to be seen. Pierce frowned. Or they're luring us out. We can't take chances. She turned to the comms officer. Deploy the defense teams but hold fire until I give the order. Ethan shook his head. Please, Captain, let me go out there first. If they wanted to attack, they would have done it already. Pierce hesitated. The room was silent for a moment except for the hum of the machinery. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but you're not going alone. Take Maria and 2 guards. You have 10 minutes. If I don't hear from you by then, we're going to full defense mode. Ethan nodded. Understood. The small team left through the south airlock. The forest was quiet except for the soft wind moving through the ash-covered trees. They walked slowly, weapons down but ready. The air smelled faintly of smoke and iron. After a few minutes, Ethan saw them, 6 dragon hatchlings standing near the edge of the clearing. They were larger now, their scales darker, more defined. The biggest one, the leader, stood in front, wings folded neatly. Ethan took a slow step forward, keeping his hands visible. Easy, he whispered. We're not here to fight. The largest hatchling tilted its head and let out a deep, vibrating sound. It wasn't a growl this time, more like a call. The others joined in, their voices blending in strange harmony. Then something unexpected happened. The largest hatchling stepped aside, revealing something behind it. A small bundle of shiny, charred metal and crystal lay on the ground. It looked like debris from the human scanners, burned and melted. Ethan's eyes widened. They brought it back, Maria whispered. They're giving it to us. Ethan crouched slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves. He examined the debris. It was one of their lost drones from a month ago, the one that had gone missing near the nesting zone. The hatchlings must have found it and brought it back as a gesture. They're communicating, Ethan said softly. They're trying to send a message. Maria's voice was quiet with wonder. They're showing they understand. Ethan reached into his pack and took out another piece of bread. He placed it gently on the ground and stepped back. The leader watched him for a long moment, then lowered its head and accepted it. For the next few minutes, no one spoke. The hatchlings stayed calm, their eyes bright and curious. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. Then the leader raised its head again and made a sound Ethan had never heard before. Low, rhythmic, almost like a chant. The other hatchlings responded with matching tones. The vibrations ran through the ground beneath his feet. Maria whispered, Ethan, they're not just animals, are they? He shook his head slowly. No, they're intelligent. Maybe more than we thought. The leader turned its gaze toward Ethan one last time before spreading its wings. The others followed, and within moments they were gone, flying low through the smoky air until they disappeared into the horizon. Ethan exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. They were trying to talk to us. Maria nodded, and we just answered back. When they returned to the colony, Captain Pierce was waiting by the airlock. Report, she demanded. Ethan handed her the scorched drone. They brought this. I think it's their way of showing peace. Pierce examined the wreckage, her face unreadable. And you're sure this wasn't a trick? They had every chance to attack. They didn't, Ethan said. They're trying to communicate. Pierce looked out toward the forest through the glass wall. The smoke had thinned, and faint beams of sunlight broke through. If they really are intelligent, she said quietly, then this changes everything. Ethan nodded. It already has. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat near the window of his quarters, watching the stars above EOS 9. He played the recording from the encounter again, the strange musical growls, the rhythmic calls. There was a pattern in them. He was sure of it. He began making notes, marking time intervals and sound frequencies. It wasn't random. The hatchlings were using sound to communicate, a structured language. He smiled to himself. Humanity had come to Eos 9 expecting to conquer a wild world. But maybe he thought they were the ones being studied. Outside, the wind carried a faint echo through the night, a distant rumble that almost sounded like a reply. The days after the encounter were quiet but heavy with tension. Everyone in the colony seemed to move slower, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had formed. Captain Pierce had ordered the defense systems to remain active but set to standby. Patrols were still sent out, but no one fired a shot. Ethan spent his time studying the recordings of the hatchling sounds. He filled pages with notes and sound patterns. The rhythmic growls repeated at precise intervals, forming sequences that reminded him of language structure. Maria helped him whenever she could, running analysis software and cross-checking frequency patterns. One evening, as they compared waveforms, the lights flickered. A low rumble shook the floor. Maria frowned. That's not normal. The reactors are stable. Then another rumble, louder this time. The console lights went red. Pierce's voice came through the intercom. All personnel, brace for impact. Massive storm system approaching from the north. Secure all outer gates. Ethan and Maria ran to the observation deck. Through the thick glass, they saw it. A wall of black clouds rolling over the mountains, lit from within by strange flashes of green lightning. Dust and fire swirled together, forming a massive vortex. Maria whispered, "I've never seen a storm like that." Ethan's stomach twisted. "It's heading straight for the nest." They both ran to the command center. Pierce was shouting orders, trying to coordinate the defense drones. "We'll have to seal the colony. That storm will tear apart anything outside the perimeter." Ethan stepped forward. "Captain, the hatchlings." Pierce cut him off. "We don't have time for that, Cole. We're barely going to survive this ourselves." Ethan clenched his fists. "If they die out there, it'll be our fault. We could warn them." Pierce's eyes were cold. "We're not risking human lives for alien creatures." Ethan turned to Maria. "We can't just sit here." She hesitated, then looked at Pierce. "Captain, the hatchlings might know a safe place. If Ethan's right about their intelligence, maybe they can survive this better than we can." Pierce stared at them for a long second, then swore under her breath. "You've got 1 hour. Take Rover 2 and a comm link. If you're not back by then, I seal the gates." "Understood." Ethan nodded. "Understood." The wind outside howled like a living thing as they climbed into the small rover. Dust and debris whipped across the field as they drove toward the forest. Lightning cracked above, green light flashing across the sky. The storm roared like thunder and fire combined. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Ethan saw the hatchlings huddled near the burned trees. The biggest one was standing tall, wings half open, shielding the smaller ones from the wind. It roared at the sky, as if challenging the storm itself. Ethan jumped out of the rover. "Maria, keep the lights on them," he shouted over the wind. He ran forward, shielding his face from flying dust. "Come on, you need to move," he shouted. Though he knew they couldn't understand his words, he pointed toward the canyon, where the rock formations might offer shelter. The leader hatchling turned its head, eyes glowing faintly. Then, to his shock, it moved toward him. It let out a sharp, commanding cry, and the others began to follow. "Ethan," Maria yelled. "The storm's almost here." He waved for her to follow. Together, they guided the hatchlings toward the canyon. The wind tore at their clothes, and lightning struck the ground behind them, leaving glassed patches of earth. At last, they reached the canyon mouth, a narrow crack in the rock that led into a deep cavern. The hatchlings rushed inside first, their claws scraping against stone. Ethan and Maria stumbled in after them, collapsing just past the entrance. Outside, the storm hit. The sound was deafening. The ground shook, and the air filled with the hiss of sand and rain. The hatchlings huddled close together, their scales glimmering in the flashes of light. The leader stood near the entrance, its wings stretched to block the wind. Maria leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. "If we hadn't come, they would have died out there." Ethan nodded weakly. Maybe they would have found shelter on their own. But now, Maybe they'll remember this. They waited for hours as the storm raged outside. Ethan dozed off and woke again, the sound of thunder still echoing in his ears. When the storm finally began to fade, a dim orange light crept into the cave. The leader hatchling approached him slowly. It lowered its head and made a soft, deep sound. Ethan reached out a trembling hand and touched its snout. "It's over," he whispered. "We made it." Maria smiled faintly. "Looks like we all did." As they stepped outside, the land was changed. The forest was scorched and bent, but the air was clean again. The storm had passed, leaving a strange peace behind. Ethan looked at the hatchlings as they stretched their wings in the sunlight. They had survived together. Whatever barrier had once existed between them was gone now. He glanced at Maria. "I think we just earned their trust for good." She nodded. "Let's hope the captain sees it that way." Far above them, the sky was clear again, but in the distance, another shape moved among the clouds. Something larger, darker, with wings far wider than the hatchlings. Ethan stared at it, awe and fear mixing in his chest. He whispered, "I think their parents are coming." The morning after the storm, the sky over Eos 9 was bright and strange. The air felt lighter, the heat less harsh. The colony had survived, though the walls were scarred, and several towers had collapsed under the force of the winds. But the biggest surprise waited beyond the perimeter. Ethan and Maria stood on the ridge overlooking the forest. The hatchlings were still near the canyon, resting and cleaning their wings. The air shimmered as the sun rose higher. Then, far in the distance, Ethan saw something move through the clouds. Huge shadows gliding with silent grace. Maria saw them too. "Ethan," she whispered, "those aren't hatchlings." He nodded slowly. "No, those are the adults." The shapes grew larger as they approached. The sound of their wings filled the air like rolling thunder. Each one was massive, their scales shining with deep metallic colors, bronze, silver, and black blue. Their eyes glowed with quiet intelligence. The largest of them landed near the canyon with a heavy thud that shook the ground. Dust rose in a cloud around its claws. The hatchlings ran forward, chirping and rumbling in joy. The big dragon lowered its head to them, touching each gently with its snout. Ethan felt awe and fear twist in his chest. "We need to tell the captain," Maria said, already reaching for her comm link. Ethan stopped her. "Wait, let's see what happens first." The adult dragons turned their gaze toward the colony. One of them spread its wings and released a deep roar, not of anger, but of warning or announcement. The sound echoed across the plain, rolling like thunder. The colony alarms went off instantly. "Command to Cole and Alvarez." Captain Pierce's voice came through the comm. "We've got massive contacts approaching your position. Fall back to base immediately." Ethan pressed the comm button. "Negative, Captain. They're not attacking. They're with the hatchlings. Please hold your fire." "Cole, that's an order." Pierce began, but Ethan cut the line. He looked at Maria. "If they sense fear or weapons, this could go bad fast." Maria's face was pale, but she nodded. "Then we'd better make sure it doesn't." They stepped forward, slowly and carefully. The largest dragon turned its massive head toward them, its eyes glowing gold in the morning light. Ethan felt the weight of that gaze like gravity. He raised his hands and took another step. The dragon lowered its head closer, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Ethan didn't move. Then, from behind one of the hatchlings, the small one with the torn wing, bounded forward and stood between them. It chirped at the big dragon, almost as if explaining something. The large dragon made a low, resonant sound in reply. Its eyes softened. It looked at Ethan again, then gently lowered its head until its snout almost touched the ground. Ethan reached out a shaking hand and touched the scales. They were warm and smooth, humming with quiet energy. The dragon didn't flinch. Instead, it let out a deep, calm breath that washed over him like wind. Maria exhaled slowly. "I can't believe this is happening." The other dragons joined in, their voices rising and blending into a strange, beautiful harmony that filled the air. The sound wasn't random, it was a pattern just like the hatchlings' calls. Ethan realized what it was. "They're communicating," he said softly. "It's language. The hatchlings must have told them about us." The largest dragon stepped back and turned its gaze toward the colony walls far away. Then it made a long, slow call, a deep tone that carried for miles. A moment later, the alarms in the colony went silent. Captain Pierce's voice came through again, softer this time. "Ethan, what's happening out there?" Ethan smiled faintly. "They're not here to fight, Captain. They're here to meet us." There was a long pause on the line. Then Pierce said quietly, "Understood. We'll hold position." The dragons moved closer, surrounding the humans but not threatening them. The hatchlings stayed near Ethan and Maria, chirping happily. The air shimmered as the largest dragon raised its wings again and gave a slow nod, as if granting recognition. Ethan bowed his head instinctively. "Thank you," he said softly, "for trusting us." The dragon's golden eyes blinked once, slowly. Then it turned toward the sky. One by one, the adults took flight, their wings beating with thunderous power. The hatchlings followed, rising into the air beside them. Together, they circled once over the canyon, casting vast shadows on the ground, before disappearing into the clouds. Ethan and Maria stood in silence, watching the sky until the last glimmer of wings vanished. Maria turned to him. "Do you think they'll come back?" Ethan smiled. "I think they already did. They just wanted us to see them as they really are." Back at the colony, Captain Pierce met them at the gate. She didn't speak at first, just looked at the horizon. Finally, she said, "I watched the whole thing from here. You were right, Cole. They weren't monsters." Ethan nodded. "No, they're people. Just not the kind we expected." Pierce sighed. "Well, I'll have a hard time explaining this to Command." Then, with a faint smile, she added, "But I'm glad you disobeyed me that first day." Ethan chuckled. "Me too." That night, the colony lights glowed softly across the quiet plains. The storm was gone, and for the first time since humans had landed on Eos 9, the world felt calm. Somewhere in the distance, a low, melodic sound rolled across the wind. A dragon's song, gentle and peaceful. Ethan listened from the window of his quarters, smiling. Humanity had come to conquer a planet. Instead, they had made peace with its guardians. And it had all begun with a simple meal shared in trust.